How to 10x Your Emotional Intelligence. A critical thinker's 7-step guide to deeper relationships. From Help Center expert. Turn your analytical mind into your greatest relationship asset. Prologue. When logic meets heart. The evening rain tapped gently against my office window as I read through Anne's email for the third time. The irony in her words was striking. Here was someone who spent her days at a help center guiding others through their crises, yet found herself unable to navigate her own emotional storms. I feel like such a fraud, and wrote. Every day at the help center, I walk people through their darkest moments. I can stay calm when someone's having a panic attack, find resources for people in crisis, and help others process their grief. But when it comes to my own relationships, I'm a complete mess. Last night, I picked a fight with David over something trivial, him forgetting to text when he was running late. My response was completely disproportionate to the situation. How can I be so composed when helping others but fall apart in my own life? Anne's story was particularly compelling because of her unique position. At 32, she had spent the last 8 years working at a community help center, rising to become one of their most trusted crisis counselors. Her colleagues praised her ability to remain level-headed in emergencies, and her case files were filled with success stories. Yet her personal life told a different story. During my shifts, I can analyze situations clearly, identify patterns, and guide people toward solutions, her email continued. But the moment my own emotions are involved, all that training seems to evaporate. It's like I become a different person, reactive, insecure, and unable to apply any of the principles I use to help others every day. This disconnect between professional capability and personal struggle is more common than most people realize, especially among those in helping professions. They often develop excellent skills for managing others' crises while struggling to apply the same principles to their own lives. Anne's story began to unfold during our sessions. She shared how her work at the help center had initially seemed like the perfect fit for her natural abilities. She was organized, analytical, and genuinely cared about helping others. The center's protocols and procedures gave her a framework for handling complex emotional situations. In crisis moments, she knew exactly what steps to take, what questions to ask, and how to guide people toward solutions. At work, everything has a protocol, she explained during our first session. If someone calls about suicidal thoughts, I have a clear set of questions to ask and steps to follow. If they're experiencing domestic violence, there's a different protocol. The structure helps me stay focused and effective. But in my personal life, there are no protocols. It's just me and my emotions, and I feel completely lost. The contrast between her professional and personal life became even more apparent as she described her relationship patterns. Despite her expertise in crisis intervention and conflict resolution, she found herself trapped in cycles of emotional reactivity with her partner, David. Minor disagreements would escalate into major conflicts, largely driven by her intense emotional responses. I know all the communication techniques, she said, her voice tinged with frustration. I teach them to others every day. Active listening, I statements, emotional validation. I can explain these concepts in my sleep. But when David does something that triggers my insecurities, it's like all that knowledge goes out the window. Instead of responding with understanding like I would at work, I react with accusations and assumptions. What made Anne's case particularly interesting was how her analytical mind seemed to work against her in personal situations. The same ability to quickly assess situations and identify patterns that made her excellent at her job became a source of anxiety in her relationships. She would overanalyze every interaction, looking for hidden meanings and potential problems, creating worst-case scenarios in her mind. Sometimes I wish I could treat my own relationship like a help center case, she admitted with a sad laugh. At work, I can look at situations objectively, separate facts from emotions, and help people find practical solutions. But when it comes to my own life, everything feels so personal, so overwhelming. I can't seem to find that objective perspective. This sentiment, the wish for a systematic approach to emotional challenges, became the starting point for our work together. Instead of seeing her analytical nature as a barrier to emotional intelligence, we began exploring how to use it as a tool for understanding and managing her emotions. During our sessions, we developed what we called the crisis counselor's mirror, a framework that allowed and to apply her professional skills to her personal life. Just as she used structured protocols at work, we created personal protocols for managing emotional triggers and relationship challenges. Think of yourself as both the counselor and the client, I suggested. When you feel overwhelmed by emotion, imagine you're receiving a call at the help center. What questions would you ask? What patterns would you look for? How would you guide this person toward understanding their reaction? This approach resonated with, and because it built on her existing strengths rather than asking her to become someone else. It allowed her to maintain her analytical nature while developing greater emotional awareness and regulation. Her journey of integrating professional expertise with personal growth is at the heart of this book. Through these pages, we'll explore how to use critical thinking and systematic approaches to understand and manage our emotional world, particularly in the context of relationships. We'll learn how to transform analytical tendencies from barriers into tools for emotional understanding. Apply professional problem-solving skills to personal emotional challenges. Develop protocols for managing emotional triggers and relationship conflicts. Build bridges between objective assessment and emotional experience. Create sustainable relationships by integrating head and heart. This isn't about suppressing emotions or overanalyzing feelings. Instead, it's about finding ways to use our logical strengths to support emotional growth and foster deeper connections. Whether you're a fellow helping professional struggling with personal relationships, or someone who simply tends to think analytically, you'll find practical tools for navigating the complex landscape of emotions and relationships. As and discovered, the skills we use to help others can be powerfully adapted to help ourselves. 6 months into our work together, she sent me an update that captured the essence of this integration. Yesterday, David was late again, and I felt that familiar panic rising. But this time, instead of reacting, I treated myself like one of my callers. I asked myself the same questions I would ask them. What am I really feeling right now? What evidence do I have for my fears? What other explanations might there be? It wasn't perfect, but it helped me respond rather than react. For the first time, I feel like my professional skills and personal growth are working together instead of against each other. This book is an invitation to join and others on this journey of integration. Through their stories and experiences, you'll discover how to use your analytical abilities to develop greater emotional intelligence and build stronger relationships. Welcome to the path of emotional intelligence through critical thinking. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Understanding your emotional operating system. The fluorescent lights of the help center hummed overhead as Anne sat at her desk, methodically organizing her case files from the day's calls. It was late, well past the end of her shift, but she remained, finding comfort in the familiar routine of documentation and analysis. Her personal phone buzzed again, another message from David, but she left it face down, focusing instead on the task at hand. It's easier here, she told me during our next session, gesturing to the carefully organized folders on my office table, mirroring her work habits. At the center, everything has a place, a purpose. Emotions are something to be documented, analyzed, understood. But in my own life, they're just chaos. And situation perfectly illustrates the challenge many face. How to bridge the gap between our analytical capabilities and our emotional experiences. Her story provides us with an ideal starting point for understanding how to apply critical thinking to emotional intelligence. The emotional data stream. Think of your emotions as a constant stream of data, I explained to Anne. Just like the calls you receive at the help center, each emotion carries important information. The key is learning how to log and analyze this data effectively. This concept sparked something in Anne's eyes. Like creating a database of emotional responses, she asked, already reaching for her notebook. Exactly. But instead of just logging other people's crises, you're documenting your own emotional patterns. Together, we developed what we called the emotional data log, a systematic approach to understanding emotional responses. The process begins with basic data collection. When Anne felt that familiar surge of anxiety about David's delayed response to her messages, instead of immediately reacting, she would document time, 7:45 p.m. trigger event. No response to message sent at 6:30 p.m. Physical sensations. Tightness in chest, rapid heartbeat thoughts. He's ignoring me. Something must be wrong. Emotional response. Anxiety, fear, anger intensity level. 8 out of 10 initial action urge. To send multiple follow-up messages. The key, I explained, is to approach this like you would a help center call. You're not trying to change or judge the emotions. Just document them accurately. This systematic approach helped and begin to see her emotional responses as data points rather than character flaws. Over time, patterns emerged that provided valuable insights into her emotional triggers and reactions. Pattern recognition and analysis. After several weeks of maintaining her emotional data log, and noticed recurring themes. The strongest emotional reactions often centered around perceived abandonment or rejection, even in situations where such fears were logically unfounded. It's like I'm running an outdated threat detection system, she realized during one session. My emotional operating system is still responding to past dangers that aren't relevant to my current relationship. This insight led us to develop the emotional pattern analysis framework, a structured approach to understanding recurring emotional responses. During one particularly revealing session, and reviewed her log entries from the past month, she noticed that her anxiety spikes often occurred around the same time of day, usually in the evening when David was commuting home from work. This pattern helped her identify a connection to childhood experiences of waiting for her mother, who often worked late shifts and sometimes didn't come home when expected. I never made that connection before, and said quietly, I've been projecting my childhood fears onto David, treating normal delays like potential abandonment. The critical thinking bridge. Understanding these patterns allowed us to build what I call the critical thinking bridge, a way to connect analytical understanding with emotional experience. This meant developing a systematic approach to managing emotional triggers. One evening, when David was running late again, and applied her new framework. First, she acknowledged her emotional response, logging it as she would at work. Experiencing anxiety, intensity 7/10, triggered by partner's delayed response. Then, she applied critical analysis. What evidence supports my current fears? What alternative explanations exist for the situation? How does my past experience influence my present interpretation? What would I tell a help center caller in a similar situation? It was like having a conversation with my professional self, and explained. I could acknowledge my feelings while also maintaining enough distance to think clearly about the situation. The integration process. The real breakthrough came when and began to integrate her professional skills with her personal emotional management. She developed what she called her personal crisis protocol. When facing intense emotions, she would acknowledge the emotional response without judgment. Document the situation using her emotional data log. Apply critical analysis tools. Develop a response plan based on current reality rather than past fears. This systematic approach didn't eliminate her emotional responses, but it gave her a framework for understanding and managing them effectively. Practical applications. As Anne continued to apply these frameworks, she began to see improvements in her relationship with David. Instead of immediately reacting to triggers, she could pause, analyze, and respond more thoughtfully. One significant test came during a weekend when David went on a camping trip with limited cell service. In the past, this would have triggered intense anxiety and potentially relationship-damaging behavior. Instead, Anne applied her framework. She documented her emotional responses throughout the weekend, noting patterns in her anxiety levels. She used critical analysis to examine her fears rationally, distinguishing between real concerns and emotional echoes from past experiences. Most importantly, she developed practical coping strategies based on this analysis. I still felt anxious, she admitted, but I could work with the anxiety instead of letting it work me. It was like having my professional self coaching my personal self through the experience. The broader impact. The implications of Anne's journey extend beyond her individual situation. Her experience demonstrates how we can use our analytical strengths to develop greater emotional intelligence rather than seeing them as opposing forces. This integration of critical thinking and emotional awareness doesn't just improve our understanding of ourselves. It enhances our ability to form and maintain healthy relationships. By approaching our emotional lives with both compassion and analysis, we can develop more effective responses to emotional challenges. Moving forward, as we conclude this chapter, consider how you might begin developing your own emotional data log. What patterns might emerge if you started documenting your emotional responses with the same care and attention you bring to other aspects of your life? Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate emotions or to overanalyze every feeling. Instead, it's about developing a systematic understanding of your emotional patterns so you can respond more effectively to life's challenges. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to apply these frameworks specifically to relationship dynamics, building on the foundation of emotional self-awareness we've established here. Your journey toward emotional intelligence through critical thinking has begun. You may find that your analytical abilities, far from being obstacles to emotional understanding, can become powerful tools for personal growth and stronger relationships. Chapter 2. Relationship Dynamics, a Critical Analysis Framework. The early morning light filtered through the help center's windows as and prepared for her shift. Her phone displayed a simple message from David. "Can we talk tonight? There's something I need to share." In the past, such a message would have sent her into an immediate spiral of anxiety and worst-case scenarios. Instead, she found herself pausing, taking a deep breath, and opening her newly created relationship analysis document. It's interesting, and shared during our next session. Before, I would have immediately assumed he wanted to break up. Now, I'm trying to approach this like I would a help center situation, gathering data before jumping to conclusions. This shift in approach marks the beginning of our exploration into applying critical thinking to relationship dynamics. Through Anne's journey, we'll discover how systematic analysis can transform our understanding of relationships while maintaining their emotional authenticity. The Relationship Data Matrix. During one of our sessions, Anne brought up an observation that would become foundational to our work. At the Help Center, we use intake forms to understand the full context of a situation. What if I created something similar for understanding my relationship patterns? Together, we developed what we came to call the Relationship Data Matrix, a framework for systematically understanding relationship dynamics. Unlike traditional relationship analysis, this approach combines emotional awareness with critical thinking, and began documenting her daily interactions with David, noting not just what happened, but the emotional context surrounding each event. One evening, she documented a typical scenario. David usually texted between 6 to 7 p.m. for their evening check-in. When his message didn't arrive one night, Anne noticed her familiar anxiety rising. Instead of immediately acting on that anxiety, she paused to analyze the situation. She noted the time, her emotional response, and most importantly, the historical pattern that might be influencing her reaction. Through this systematic observation, she began to see how her childhood experiences of uncertainty about her parents' return were coloring her current expectations of David. Looking at it this way, Anne noted, "I can see how my past experiences create expectations that don't match our current reality. David has never actually failed to communicate eventually, yet I react as if each delayed message means abandonment." Understanding relationship algorithms. As we delve deeper into Anne's relationship patterns, we discovered what I call relationship algorithms, recurring sequences of actions and reactions that shape relationship dynamics. These weren't simple cause and effect relationships, but complex patterns of interaction that developed over time, and began recognizing how certain scenarios played out predictably. When David mentioned working late, for instance, it would trigger a sequence of events. Her initial anxiety would lead to multiple checking messages, which would make David feel pressured and withdraw slightly, which in turn would confirm her fears of abandonment. Understanding this pattern helped her see how her reactions influenced the very outcomes she feared. Through our work together, Anne learned to modify these algorithms. Instead of letting her initial emotional response drive the sequence, she learned to pause and analyze the situation. She would acknowledge her anxiety, but then examine the evidence. David's consistent history of communication, his commitment to their relationship, and the realistic demands of his job. The Communication Analysis Framework. One evening, when David arrived for their planned conversation and was prepared with her new understanding. Instead of approaching the discussion with fear, she applied what we called the communication analysis framework. This wasn't a rigid script, but rather a way of staying present and aware during important conversations. Before David arrived and took time to center herself and document her current emotional state, she reminded herself of the observable facts of their relationship rather than her fears and assumptions. When David began speaking about his potential career change and found herself able to listen with genuine curiosity rather than fear, she paid attention not just to his words, but to the emotional undertones of the conversation. She noticed how his voice carried excitement when discussing new possibilities and anxiety when mentioning potential risks. Most importantly, she observed her own emotional responses without being overwhelmed by them, building trust through systematic understanding. As and continued applying these analytical tools to her relationship, she discovered something unexpected. Rather than making their connection more mechanical, this systematic approach actually deepened their emotional intimacy. It's like having a map, she explained. When I understand the territory better, I feel safer exploring it emotionally. Their trust-building process became more intentional and began documenting instances of reliability, noting patterns of emotional safety, and identifying opportunities for deeper connection. She paid attention to how they both responded to emotional sharing, how they supported each other through difficulties, and how their relationship grew stronger through challenges. The conflict resolution journey. Perhaps the most significant transformation came in how and David handled conflicts. Drawing from her experience at the help center, and began approaching their disagreements with the same careful attention she gave to crisis calls. But this wasn't about treating David like a client. It was about bringing professional-level awareness to their personal interactions. During one particularly challenging weekend, they faced a conflict over David's camping trip, where he would have limited cell service. In the past, this would have triggered intense anxiety and potentially relationship-damaging behavior. Instead, Anne approached it methodically, while still honoring her emotional experience. First, she acknowledged her fears openly with David. "I'm scared about not being able to reach you," she admitted. "But I also want to understand what this trip means to you." This vulnerable honesty opened up a deeper conversation about their needs and fears. Together, they developed a plan that addressed both practical and emotional concerns. They agreed on check-in times when possible, discussed emergency contact protocols, and most importantly, explored the deeper issues of trust and independence in their relationship. What amazed me, and shared later, was how addressing the practical aspects actually helped us connect emotionally. By facing my fears systematically, I could be more present for the real intimacy between us. The emotional investment process. One of our most innovative developments was what Anne called HERB emotional investment process, a thoughtful approach to understanding and nurturing relationship growth. Rather than thinking of emotional investment as something that just happens, and began seeing it as an intentional practice. She started paying attention to how they spent their time together, noting which activities strengthened their connection and which might be draining their emotional resources. She observed how they supported each other's personal growth while maintaining their individual identities. It's like tending a garden, and reflected. You need to understand the soil, the climate, what helps things grow. Our relationship needs the same kind of attentive care. This awareness led to more conscious choices about their time together. They began prioritizing activities that fostered genuine connection. Long walks where they could talk without distractions, shared hobbies that brought them joy, and regular check-ins about their emotional well-being. Real-world application. The true test of these frameworks came during a challenging period when David's career change required them to consider a temporary long-distance arrangement. Instead of letting fear drive her response, and applied her new understanding to the situation. She began by acknowledging her emotional response, the fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. But instead of letting these emotions control her actions, she used them as data points to inform a more comprehensive approach to the situation, and spent time examining their relationship's foundation. She looked at how they had handled separation in the past, even brief ones. She considered their communication patterns and how they might need to adapt. Most importantly, She focused on the evidence of their relationship's strength rather than her fears about its vulnerability. When she and David discussed the potential change, and was able to bring both emotional honesty and practical solutions to the conversation. "I'm scared," she told him, "but I also believe in us. Let's figure out how to make this work." Together, they developed strategies for maintaining their connection across distance. They didn't just focus on practical matters like scheduling video calls. They also discussed how to share everyday moments, maintain emotional intimacy, and support each other's growth during the separation. The integration of systems. As Anne's story demonstrates, applying critical thinking to relationships doesn't diminish their emotional depth. It enhances our ability to understand and nurture them. The key is integration, combining analytical understanding with emotional awareness. It's like having both a microscope and a telescope, and reflected. I can examine the details of our interactions while also seeing the bigger picture of our relationship's growth. This integration helped and moved from reactive to responsive in her relationship. When challenges arose, she could draw on both her emotional intelligence and her analytical skills to navigate them effectively. Moving forward, the frameworks and approaches we've explored in this chapter aren't meant to replace genuine emotional connection. Rather, they provide a structure that supports emotional health and growth. By understanding the patterns and processes at work in our relationships, we can make more conscious choices about how we connect with others. For Anne and David, this systematic approach led to a deeper, more resilient relationship. They learned to face challenges together, combining emotional honesty with practical problem solving. Their story demonstrates how critical thinking can enhance rather than inhibit emotional intimacy. As we prepare to explore trauma healing in the next chapter, consider how these frameworks might apply to your own relationships. What patterns might you discover? How could systematic observation and analysis enhance your understanding of relationship dynamics? Remember, the goal isn't to remove emotion from relationships, but to create a structure that supports emotional health and growth. Like Anne, you may find that combining critical thinking with emotional awareness creates stronger, more conscious connections. Chapter 3. Healing Past Wounds. A critical approach to emotional trauma. The phone at the help center rang, just as Anne was finishing her documentation. The caller was in crisis, struggling with trust issues stemming from childhood abandonment. As Anne guided them through the center's trauma protocol, she felt a familiar ache in her chest. Later that evening, during our session, she made a profound connection. "I realized something today," she said, her voice quiet but steady. While helping this caller, I could see their patterns so clearly, how past abandonment was affecting their current relationships. It made me wonder about my own patterns, especially with my mother's inconsistent presence during my childhood. This realization marked the beginning of a deeper journey into understanding how past trauma affects current relationships and how critical thinking can help us heal these old wounds. Understanding the echo of the past. We began by exploring what I call the trauma pattern recognition system, a way of understanding how past experiences reverberate through our present lives, and started by examining key moments from her childhood, not just as memories, but as formative experiences that shaped her current relationship patterns. She recalled the evening her mother first started working night shifts. 7-year-old, and would sit by the window, watching the street, waiting for headlights that might signal her mother's return. Sometimes the wait would stretch for hours beyond the expected time, each minute building a foundation of anxiety that would echo into her adult life. I never connected it before and shared, but that's exactly what I do with David. When he's late, I find myself by the phone, checking messages, watching the time. It's the same feeling, the same fear, just in a different context. This insight led us to explore other significant moments. When Anne was 12, her mother missed an important school performance and had earned the lead role in the school play, practiced for months, only to look out at an empty seat where her mother should have been. The next day brought explanations about mandatory overtime, but the damage was done. I became an overachiever after that and realized, I thought if I was just perfect enough, important enough, someone would finally stay. I can see now how that affects my relationships, this constant need to prove my worth, to earn love through achievement. the layers of understanding. As we delved deeper into Anne's history, we developed what we came to call emotional archaeology, a systematic approach to uncovering and understanding layers of emotional experience. Like an archaeological dig, we carefully excavated through the layers of Anne's emotional history, examining each finding with both compassion and analytical clarity. The surface layer revealed her current reactions: the anxiety when David was late, the overwhelming need to check on his whereabouts, the fear that gripped her when plans changed unexpectedly. But as we dug deeper, patterns emerged that connected these present-day responses to past experiences. We discovered that Anne's intense fear of abandonment wasn't just about David. It was a deep-seated response rooted in years of uncertainty and unmet emotional needs. Each layer we uncovered revealed new connections between past and present, helping and understand why certain situations triggered such powerful responses. The bridge between then and now. One of our most significant breakthroughs came when and began recognizing her trauma responses in real time. During a particularly challenging week, David was working late on a crucial project. Each evening, as the hours stretched past his usual return time, and found herself experiencing intense physical and emotional reactions. Instead of getting lost in these responses, and began documenting them with the same careful attention she gave to her help center cases. She noticed how her heart would race, her chest would tighten, and her thoughts would spiral into worst-case scenarios. But now, with her growing understanding, she could recognize these as trauma responses rather than realistic reactions to current circumstances. "It's like having a split screen in my mind," she explained. "On one side, I can see my younger self, terrified of being abandoned again. On the other, I can see the reality of my current situation, David, who has always been reliable, working late on a project he's discussed with me. Both experiences feel real, but now I can distinguish between them." The healing integration process. As Anne's awareness grew, we developed what we called the healing integration protocol, a way of processing and responding to trauma triggers that honored both her emotional experience and her need for systematic understanding. When trauma responses arose, and learned to first acknowledge them without judgment, she would note her physical sensations, emotional responses, and the thoughts racing through her mind. But instead of getting caught in these reactions, she would then engage in a gentle process of reality testing. She would ask herself questions like, what is actually happening right now? What evidence do I have about the current situation? How is this different from my past experiences? These questions weren't meant to invalidate her feelings, but to help her distinguish between past trauma and present reality. The most powerful part of this process was what Anne called dialoguing with her younger self. When she felt panic rising about David's delayed response to a message, she would acknowledge the frightened child within her while also reminding herself of her adult resources and current reality. I tell her we're safe now and shared. I let her know I understand why she's scared, but also that we have new tools, new understanding, and people who have proven themselves trustworthy. It's like being both the counselor and the client, but in a way that feels healing rather than divided, building new patterns. The real transformation began when Anne started applying these insights to her current relationship. She and David had always communicated well, but now their conversations took on new depth and meaning, and found herself able to share not just her feelings, but the context behind them. During one particularly meaningful conversation, she explained to David how her past experiences affected her current fears. Instead of just asking him to text more often, she could explain why missed messages triggered such deep anxiety. This understanding allowed them to develop strategies that addressed both her emotional needs and practical realities. Together, they created what Anne called safety bridges, ways of maintaining connection that acknowledged her trauma responses while building new, healthier patterns. They established regular check-in times, not as a restriction, but as a mutual commitment to each other's peace of mind. When plans needed to change, they developed protocols for communication that helped and feel secure while maintaining flexibility. The professional impact. As Anne's personal healing progressed, she noticed changes in her work at the help center as well. Her increased understanding of her own trauma made her more effective in helping others with similar struggles. She could guide callers through their crises with deeper empathy while maintaining professional boundaries. It's like having a map now, she explained. When callers describe their relationship fears, I can recognize the patterns without getting lost in them. I can hold space for their pain while also helping them see paths forward, the ongoing journey. Healing from trauma isn't a linear process, as undiscovered. There were still challenging days, moments when old fears would surface unexpectedly. But with her new understanding and tools, these moments became opportunities for deeper healing rather than setbacks. During one particularly difficult weekend, when David needed to take an unexpected business trip and found herself facing all her old abandonment fears. But instead of letting these fears control her actions, she used them as catalysts for growth. She documented her emotional responses, acknowledged her younger self's fears, and also recognized how different her current situation was from her past experiences. She maintained communication with David while also practicing self-care and using her support systems. The fear didn't disappear completely, she shared afterward, but it no longer controlled me. I could feel it without being consumed by it. That's when I realized how far I've come in my healing journey. Moving forward, as we conclude this chapter, it's important to recognize that healing from relationship trauma is a deeply personal journey. Anne's story demonstrates how combining critical thinking with emotional awareness can create a path forward. But each person's journey will be unique. The key is developing an understanding of how past experiences influence present reactions, while building tools and strategies for creating healthier patterns. This isn't about erasing the past or suppressing emotional responses. It's about developing a deeper understanding that allows for both healing and growth. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to build sustainable relationship patterns using these integrated approaches to emotional health and critical thinking. Like Anne, you may find that understanding your past is the key to creating a better future. Chapter 4. Building Sustainable Relationships. From Understanding to Action. A gentle rain pattered against the help center windows as Anne organized her desk for the day's shift. Her phone lit up with a message from David. Just wanted to say I love you. Looking forward to our dinner tonight. A warm smile spread across her face as she realized something profound. For the first time in years, she felt no anxiety about the upcoming evening. No need to confirm multiple times. No urge to create backup plans. No fear of potential disappointment. It's not that the fears have completely disappeared, she shared during our next session. It's that I've learned to build something stronger than fear. A sustainable foundation for our relationship. This revelation marked the beginning of our exploration into what makes relationships not just survive but thrive over time. Through Anne's journey, we'll discover how to transform insights into lasting change. The foundation of sustainability. Anne's work at the Help Center had taught her that crisis intervention, while crucial, was only the first step in creating lasting change. The same principle applied to her relationship with David. Understanding her trauma responses and managing immediate triggers was essential, but building a sustainable relationship required something more. I realized we needed to create what I call relationship infrastructure, and explained. At the Help Center, we don't just help people through their immediate crisis. We help them build support systems and develop ongoing coping strategies. I wanted to apply the same principle to my relationship with David. Together, we began exploring what relationship infrastructure meant in practice. It wasn't about creating rigid rules or expectations, but rather developing flexible, resilient systems that could support both partners' growth and needs. The daily practice of connection. And then David began by examining their daily interactions. Instead of letting their connection depend on random moments or crisis responses, they developed intentional practices that strengthened their bond consistently. Every morning, they started their day with what and called their connection moment, a brief but meaningful exchange before facing the world. Sometimes it was as simple as sharing their dreams from the night before. Other times it involved deeper conversations about their hopes for the day ahead. It's not about the length of time, and noted, but about the quality of attention we give each other. These moments become anchors throughout our day, reminding us that we're in this together. Creating sustainable communication patterns. One of the most significant changes came in how Anne and David approached communication. Rather than relying on reactive patterns or emergency responses, they developed what Anne called communication rhythms, regular, intentional ways of staying connected that respected both their needs. They established evening check-ins, not from a place of anxiety, but as a loving ritual of sharing their days. These weren't just surface-level exchanges, but meaningful conversations that helped them stay attuned to each other's emotional states and needs. We created what we call exploration questions and shared. Instead of just asking, "How was your day?" we might ask, "What surprised you today?" or "What made you feel most alive?" It keeps our conversations fresh and helps us discover new things about each other. The growth partnership model. As their relationship evolved, Anne and David began viewing their partnership as a platform for mutual growth rather than just emotional support. They developed what we came to call the growth partnership model, a way of supporting each other's individual development while strengthening their connection. When David expressed interest in pursuing a new career direction, instead of seeing it as a potential threat to their stability, Anne approached it as an opportunity for both personal and relationship growth. They spent time exploring not just the practical implications, but how this change could help them both evolve. "I started seeing our relationship as a garden we're tending together," Anne explained. "Sometimes one plant needs more attention, sometimes another. The key is understanding that nurturing individual growth strengthens the whole garden." Navigating challenges together. The true test of their sustainable approach came during periods of stress or conflict. Instead of falling back into old patterns of anxiety and withdrawal, they had developed new ways of facing challenges together. During a particularly stressful month, when both faced increased work demands, they implemented what they called their stress support system. This included regular check-ins about their stress levels, shared self-care activities, and clear communication about needs and boundaries. What amazed me, and reflected, was how our relationship actually grew stronger during this difficult time. Instead of stress pulling us apart, our new patterns helped us turn toward each other for support, the role of ritual and routine, and discovered that creating sustainable patterns wasn't just about managing problems. It was about building positive rituals that reinforced their connection. She and David began developing what they called relationship rituals, regular practices that helped them maintain their emotional connection even during busy or stressful times. They established Sunday morning coffee dates where they would discuss their hopes and plans for the week ahead. They created monthly adventure days where they would try something new together. These weren't just activities. They were investments in their shared experience and growth. These rituals give our relationship rhythm and depth, Anne explained. They're like regular deposits in our emotional bank account, ensuring we have resources to draw on when challenges arise. Building resilience through understanding. One of the most powerful aspects of their sustainable approach was how it incorporated understanding of each other's emotional patterns and needs. Instead of just working around triggers or vulnerabilities, they learned to work with them constructively, and shared her trauma history with David more fully, not as a list of problems to solve, but as part of their shared understanding. In turn, David opened up about his own fears and vulnerabilities. This mutual understanding allowed them to support each other more effectively during difficult times. It's like having an emotional map of each other, and said, "We know where the sensitive areas are, but instead of avoiding them, we've learned how to navigate them together." The future focus. As their relationship strengthened, Anne and David began spending more time discussing and planning their future together. But unlike Anne's previous attempts to control the future through anxiety and overplanning, this was about creating a shared vision while remaining flexible about the details. They developed what Anne called their horizon conversations, regular discussions about their individual and shared dreams, goals, and fears about the future. These weren't just practical planning sessions, but opportunities to align their visions and support each other's aspirations. The integration of systems. The sustainable patterns Anne and David developed weren't separate from their daily lives. They became integrated into how they functioned as a couple. Their communication systems, growth focus, and mutual support became natural parts of their relationship rather than extra tasks to manage. It's like we've created a healthy ecosystem, and reflected. Each part supports the others, making the whole system more resilient and sustainable. Moving forward, as we conclude this chapter, consider how these principles of sustainability might apply to your own relationships. Building sustainable patterns isn't about creating perfect systems or avoiding all problems. It's about developing resilient, growth-oriented practices that can support your relationship through both challenges and opportunities. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to maintain these sustainable patterns while continuing to grow and evolve as individuals and as a couple. Like Anne and David, you may find that creating sustainable relationship patterns not only strengthens your connection, but enriches your individual lives as well. Remember, sustainability in relationships isn't about reaching a final destination. It's about creating patterns that support continuous growth and deepening connection. The journey continues, but now with stronger foundations and clearer direction. Chapter 5. Evolving Together. Maintaining connection through life's changes. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees outside the help center as and prepared for an important training session. She was about to lead her first workshop on relationship crisis intervention, drawing from both her professional experience and personal growth. As she reviewed her notes, a text from David caught her attention. Big news to share. Got the promotion. Different department though. We should talk about what this means for us. In the past, such a message would have sent and into an anxiety spiral, imagining worst-case scenarios about how changes might threaten their relationship. Instead, she felt a complex mix of emotions. Excitement for David's success, curiosity about the implications, and yes, a touch of anxiety. But now these feelings were informative rather than overwhelming. It's fascinating, she shared during our session later that week. I'm watching my own response to change with new awareness. The old fears are still there, but they're more like background music now, not the main song. The evolution of security. Anne's journey had brought her to a new understanding of relationship security. Rather than seeking certainty through control or constant reassurance, she had learned to find security in their shared ability to navigate change together. The promotion news provided a perfect opportunity to put their evolved relationship patterns to the test. Instead of rushing to discuss it immediately, Anne and David each took time to process their own thoughts and feelings. They scheduled a proper conversation for the weekend, giving them both space to consider the implications fully. We've learned that big discussions need breathing room, and explained. It's not about delaying or avoiding, but about coming to the conversation with clarity rather than reactivity. Dancing with change. Their weekend discussion about the promotion became what Anne called a relationship dance, a balanced exchange of thoughts, feelings, and practical considerations. They sat in their favorite coffee shop, the familiar environment providing comfort as they explored unfamiliar territory. David shared his excitement about the new role, but also his concerns about the learning curve and increased responsibilities. And listened without jumping to solutions or worst-case scenarios, practicing the presence she developed through their journey together. I noticed something remarkable during that conversation and reflected. Even as we discussed significant changes to our daily routines, I felt grounded in our connection. The security wasn't in keeping things the same, but in knowing we could face changes together. Practical evolution. The promotion meant David would be working with a different team, in a different building with different hours. Instead of seeing these changes as threats to their established patterns, Anne and David approached them as opportunities to evolve their relationship rituals. Their morning coffee routine needed adjustment due to David's earlier start time. Rather than abandoning it, they reimagined it. They began having their connection time the night before, creating a new ritual of evening check-ins that actually deepened their communication. We discovered that adapting our patterns wasn't about loss and shared. It was about growth. Each change became an opportunity to recommit to our connection while finding new ways to express it. The challenge of success. As David settled into his new role and faced her own evolution, her workshop at the Help Center was well received, leading to requests for more training sessions. Success brought its own challenges to their relationship, managing two growing careers while maintaining their emotional connection. They found themselves navigating what Anne called the abundance problem, having more opportunities than time. This required them to develop new skills in prioritization and boundary setting, both individually and as a couple. We had to learn that saying no to some opportunities meant saying yes to our relationship, and explained. But it wasn't about sacrifice. It was about conscious choice, deep listening, and transition. One evening, as they discussed their evolving schedules and noticed David seemed distant, instead of assuming it was about work stress or their relationship, she employed what she called layered listening, paying attention not just to words but to the emotions and needs beneath them. Through gentle exploration, she discovered David was wrestling with imposter syndrome in his new role, questioning whether he deserved the promotion. This vulnerability might have gone unnoticed in their earlier relationship patterns, but their evolved communication skills allowed for deeper understanding. It reminded me that even as we grow stronger together, we each still face our own internal challenges, and reflected. The key is creating space for both individual struggles and shared support. The integration challenge. As both their careers advanced, Anne and David faced the challenge of integrating their professional growth with their personal connection. They developed what they called integration check-ins, regular conversations about how their individual developments were affecting their relationship. These weren't just practical scheduling discussions, but deeper explorations of how their growth was shaping them both individually and as a couple. They talked about their dreams, fears, and how to support each other's ambitions while maintaining their emotional intimacy. We realized that professional success didn't have to compete with personal connection, and noted, when we approached it mindfully, each area of growth could enhance the other, maintaining emotional presence. The increased demands on their time and energy required new approaches to maintaining emotional presence with each other. They developed what is called micro-connections, small but meaningful ways to stay attuned to each other throughout busy days. These might be quick voice messages, sharing a moment of appreciation, or simple texts acknowledging each other's challenges. The key was maintaining emotional connection even when physical presence wasn't possible. We learned that emotional presence doesn't always require long conversations, and explained. Sometimes it's just about letting each other know we're holding space in our hearts, even when we're physically apart. The art of shared growth. As their individual paths flourished, Anne and David discovered what they called growth synergy, ways their separate developments could enhance their shared journey. They began sharing their learning experiences, bringing insights from their professional growth into their relationship. Anne's expanding role at the Help Center gave her new perspectives on emotional support, while David's leadership challenges provided insights into communication and boundary setting. They created regular learning exchanges where they would share these discoveries with each other. Navigating different paces. One of the most delicate aspects of evolving together was managing different rates of growth and change. There were times when one partner's development seemed to outpace the others, creating potential for insecurity or disconnect. They learned to approach these differences with curiosity rather than comparison, understanding that growth isn't always linear or synchronized. They developed language to discuss these disparities openly, without judgment or pressure. We had to learn that being in sync doesn't mean moving at the same pace, and reflected. It means supporting each other's individual rhythms while maintaining our connection. The future view. As they settled into their evolved roles and relationship patterns, Anne and David began to look toward future challenges and opportunities with new confidence. They understood that change would continue to be a constant in their lives, but now they had tools and understanding to face it together. They started what they called their horizon planning, regular discussions about future possibilities that balanced aspiration with flexibility. These conversations weren't about controlling the future, but about maintaining shared awareness of their evolving dreams and goals. Moving forward, as we conclude this chapter, consider how your own relationships might evolve through life's changes. The key isn't to prevent change or control its direction, but to develop tools and understanding that allow for growth while maintaining connection. Remember, relationship evolution isn't about reaching a final form, but about continuing to grow and adapt together. Each change brings both challenges and opportunities for deeper connection and understanding. In our final chapter, we'll explore how to maintain these evolving patterns while preparing for future challenges and opportunities. Like Ann and David, you may find that the ability to evolve together strengthens not just your relationship, but your individual development as well. Chapter 6. Future-proofing your relationship. Preparing for life's uncertainties. The winter sun cast long shadows across Anne's desk at the help center as she reviewed a particularly challenging case. A couple on the verge of separation had called, their relationship strained by unexpected life changes, a job loss, a health crisis, and family pressures all converging at once. As Anne documented their situation, she found herself reflecting on her own journey with David and the importance of preparing for life's uncertainties. It's not about predicting every possible challenge, she shared during our session. It's about building a relationship that's resilient enough to weather whatever comes our way. The foundation of future resilience. That evening, as Anne and David sat in their favorite corner of their local cafe, they had what they called a future-facing conversation. David had just learned about potential company restructuring, and instead of letting anxiety about uncertainty dominate their discussion, they approached it with the wisdom gained from their journey together. Remember when your promotion news would have sent me in a panic mode? And said, warming her hands around her coffee mug. Now we can face uncertainty together, not as a threat, but as part of our shared journey. They had learned that preparing for the future wasn't about controlling outcomes, but about strengthening their ability to face challenges together. This understanding had transformed how they approached potential changes and challenges in their relationship. Building emotional reserves. And likened their approach to emotional preparation to saving for a rainy day. Just as we build financial savings for unexpected expenses, she explained, we've learned to build emotional reserves for challenging times. These emotional reserves came from consistent investment in their relationship during good times. They maintained their connection rituals, continued their deep conversations, and regularly expressed appreciation for each other. These weren't just pleasant activities. They were conscious investments in their relationship's future resilience. One evening, after a particularly meaningful conversation about their hopes for the future, Anne realized something important. The strength of our relationship isn't in avoiding difficulties, she noted. It's in knowing that we've built something strong enough to handle them. The practice of preventive maintenance. Drawing from her experience at the help center, Anne understood that many relationship crises could be prevented through regular maintenance. She and David developed what they called their relationship checkup practice. Regular times to assess the health of their connection and address any concerns before they became problems. During these checkups, they would discuss various aspects of their relationship. Communication patterns, emotional needs, shared goals, and potential challenges on the horizon. These weren't problem-solving sessions, but opportunities for honest reflection and proactive adjustment. It's like maintaining a car, David observed during one such discussion. You don't wait for something to break down completely before addressing it. Regular maintenance prevents major breakdowns. Developing crisis protocols. Through Anne's work at the help center, she had seen how unprepared many couples were for major life crises. She and David decided to develop what they called their relationship crisis protocols, agreed upon ways of handling significant challenges when they arose. These weren't rigid rules, but rather shared understandings about how they would support each other during difficult times. They discussed how they would handle potential scenarios like job loss, health issues, or family emergencies, not to control these situations, but to have a foundation of mutual understanding to build upon. Having these conversations in calm times helps us respond better in crisis moments, and explained. It's not about predicting exactly what will happen, but about knowing we have shared principles to guide us. The growth mindset in action. One of the most powerful tools Anne and David developed was their shared understanding that challenges could be opportunities for growth. When David's company announced its restructuring plans, instead of viewing it solely as a threat, they approached it as a chance to strengthen their relationship and possibly explore new directions together. They spent evening walks discussing not just contingency plans, but also dreams and possibilities. What if this change opened doors they hadn't considered? How could they support each other's growth through uncertainty? We've learned that security isn't about maintaining the status quo, and reflected. It's about knowing we can grow and adapt together through whatever comes our way, creating flexible future plans. And David developed what they called adaptive planning, a way of making future plans that maintain direction while allowing for flexibility. Instead of rigid 5-year plans, they created what they called horizon goals, general directions they wanted to move toward while remaining open to different paths of getting there. This approach proved invaluable when unexpected opportunities arose. When and was offered a leadership position at a different help center, they could evaluate it not just based on immediate practical concerns, but on how it aligned with their shared vision for the future. The key is having enough structure to feel guided, but enough flexibility to adapt, and explained. It's about having roots and wings. The support network perspective. Through their journey, Ann and David had learned the importance of maintaining a strong support network. They consciously cultivated relationships with other couples who shared their commitment to growth and resilience. These weren't just social connections, but part of what Ann called their relationship ecosystem, a network of support that could help them navigate challenges and celebrate successes. They participated in couples workshops, maintained friendships with mentoring couples, and even started a small group for couples interested in conscious relationship development. Maintaining individual growth. One of the most important aspects of future-proofing their relationship was maintaining their individual growth alongside their couple development. They understood that resilient relationships required strong individuals. They supported each other's personal development goals, maintained individual friendships, and pursued separate interests while staying connected. This balance of autonomy and togetherness strengthened their ability to face future challenges. We're stronger together because we're also strong individually, and noted. It's about having a secure base from which to grow. The long view. As they looked toward the future, Ann and David maintained what they called perspective practice, regularly stepping back to view their relationship in the longer context of their life journey together. During one such reflection, Ann shared a profound realization. Every challenge we've faced has ultimately strengthened our connection when we've approached it together. It's not about avoiding difficulties, but about facing them as a team, moving forward. As we conclude this chapter and approach the end of our journey together, consider how these principles of future-proofing might apply to your own relationships. Remember that preparing for the future isn't about controlling it, but about building the resilience to face it together. The tools and insights we've explored throughout this book, from understanding our emotional patterns to building sustainable relationship practices, all contribute to creating relationships that can not only survive but thrive through life's uncertainties. In our final chapter, we'll reflect on the complete journey and explore how to maintain these practices over the long term. Like Ann and David, you may find that the greatest security comes not from avoiding change, but from knowing you can face it together. Chapter 7. The Continuing Journey. Integration and Growth. The spring sunshine streamed through the Help Center's newly installed windows as Ann prepared for her final session with me. 2 years had passed since that first day when she'd arrived, overwhelmed by relationship anxiety and struggling to reconcile her analytical nature with her emotional needs. Now, she sat across from me with a quiet confidence that spoke of deep personal transformation. "You know what I realized this morning?" she said, settling in her familiar spot on the couch. "I was reviewing some old case notes from when I first started at the Help Center, and I noticed something fascinating. The advice I gave others was always so clear, so structured. But I couldn't apply it to myself until I learned to bridge the gap between my professional knowledge and personal experience. The integration of learning." Ann's journey had come full circle. She was now leading relationship workshops at the Help Center, sharing her insights about combining critical thinking with emotional intelligence. Her personal experience had enhanced her professional expertise, and her professional skills had strengthened her personal relationships. Last week, I had a caller who reminded me so much of myself 2 years ago, and shared. She was stuck in the same pattern, analyzing everything but unable to find emotional peace. I could guide her with such clarity because I'd walked that path myself. The transformation wasn't just professional. Ann and David had developed a relationship that balanced security with growth, stability with adaptation. Their evening walks had become a time for reflecting on their journey and exploring new aspects of their connection. The evolution of understanding. During one of their recent walks, They'd encountered a young couple arguing on a park bench. The scene reminded Anne of how far she and David had come in their own communication patterns. We could hear them falling into the same traps we used to, and recalled the defensive responses, the assumptions, the fear beneath the anger. David squeezed my hand, and we shared this knowing look. Not judgmental, just grateful for how much we've learned. Their own communication had evolved into something and called integrated dialogue, conversations that honored both emotional truth and analytical clarity. They could discuss challenges without triggering old fears, explore differences without threatening their connection. The ongoing practice. One evening, as they prepared dinner together, David asked an interesting question. Do you think we'll ever be completely fixed? The question led to a deep discussion about the nature of growth and healing. I realized then that it's not about reaching some perfect state, and explained. It's about continuing to grow, learn, and adapt together. The tools we've developed aren't a destination. They're companions for the ongoing journey. This understanding had transformed how they approached their relationship maintenance. Instead of seeking perfection, they focused on continuous small improvements, regular check-ins, and open exploration of new challenges and opportunities. The ripple effect. Anne's transformation had effects beyond her relationship with David. Her colleagues at the Help Center noticed the change in her approach to crisis intervention. She brought a unique perspective that combined professional expertise with personal understanding. I've started incorporating what I've learned about critical thinking and emotional intelligence into our training programs, and shared. Teaching others how to bridge that gap between analytical understanding and emotional wisdom has become my passion. Her workshops began attracting attention from other help centers, and she found herself being invited to speak at professional conferences. What had started as a personal journey was becoming a way to help others navigate similar challenges. The future perspective. As Anne prepared for her final session, she reflected on what lay ahead. There would be new challenges, unexpected changes, moments of doubt or difficulty. But now she had not just tools, but understanding, not just techniques, but wisdom. David and I were talking about our future plans last night, she said. Instead of feeling anxious about uncertainties, we found ourselves excited about the possibilities. We know we have a strong foundation, but we're also ready to keep learning and growing. They had planned a series of what they called growth adventures, intentional challenges and experiences that would push them to continue developing both individually and as a couple. These weren't just activities, but opportunities for deepening their connection and understanding. The integration of lessons. Throughout their journey, Anne and David had learned several fundamental truths about relationships. Growth is continuous. There's no final destination in relationship development, just ongoing opportunities for deeper understanding and connection. Balance is dynamic. The integration of critical thinking and emotional intelligence isn't about finding a fixed point, but about maintaining flexible equilibrium. Security comes from adaptability. True relationship security isn't about preventing change, but about knowing you can face it together. Connection requires intention. Deep relationships don't just happen. They're built through consistent, conscious effort and attention. The path forward. As our final session drew to a close, and shared a moment from her morning routine that captured the essence of her transformation. I was standing in the kitchen, waiting for the coffee to brew, when David came in looking worried. In the past, his expression would have triggered all my anxiety about potential problems. Instead, I felt this calm curiosity. I could acknowledge my slight anxiety, while still remaining present and open to whatever he needed to share. It turned out David was just concerned about a work presentation, but Anne's response demonstrated how far she'd come. She could now navigate emotional waters with both awareness and stability. The continuing practice. For those beginning this journey of integrating critical thinking with emotional intelligence, Anne offered these insights. Start where you are. You don't need to have everything figured out to begin making positive changes. Use what you know. Your existing skills and strengths, whether analytical or emotional, can be bridges to new understanding. Stay curious. Approach your patterns and reactions with genuine interest rather than judgment. Practice patience. Deep change takes time and consistent effort. Maintain connection. The journey is easier and richer when shared with others who understand and support your growth. The final reflection. As and prepare to leave my office for the last time, she paused at the door. "You know what the biggest surprise has been?" she said. "I thought learning to combine critical thinking with emotional intelligence would make my life more controlled, more predictable. Instead, it's made me more open to life's uncertainties, more capable of facing challenges, more alive to each moment." She smiled, touching the journal she always carried, the one filled with her observations, insights, and ongoing discoveries about relationships and personal growth. "The journey doesn't end here," she said. "It just keeps evolving, offering new opportunities for growth and deeper understanding. And now, instead of fearing that ongoing process, I welcome it. Moving forward, as we conclude this book, remember that your own journey of integrating critical thinking with emotional intelligence is unique. The tools, insights, and experiences we've explored through Anne's story are not prescriptions but possibilities, ways of understanding and approaching your own path of growth. Whether you're dealing with relationship anxiety, trust issues, communication challenges, or simply seeking deeper connection, remember that the goal isn't perfection but progress. Each step forward, each new understanding, each moment of integration between head and heart creates possibilities for richer, more fulfilling relationships. The journey continues. May you find both courage and companionship along the way. Epilogue: The Ripples of Change. 1 year after our final session, I received an unexpected email from Anne. She had just finished leading a weekend workshop at a relationship counseling conference, where she'd shared her journey of integrating critical thinking with emotional intelligence. Her message captured both the continuing nature of growth and the profound impact one person's transformation can have on others. "Something remarkable happened during the workshop," she wrote. "As I shared my story of struggling with relationship anxiety and the tools that helped me bridge the gap between analytical thinking and emotional awareness, I saw the same recognition in participants' eyes that I once saw in my own reflection. They too were seeking ways to reconcile their logical minds with their emotional hearts." She went on to describe a particular moment that stood out. "During the lunch break, a woman approached me, a software engineer who moonlights as a crisis counselor. She described feeling exactly as I had 2 years ago, completely capable of helping others through crises but struggling to manage her own emotional responses in relationships. As she spoke, I could see David across the room, chatting with other participants, and it struck me how far we've come. Not because we've achieved perfection, but because we've learned to embrace the journey itself." Anne's workshop had evolved into a regular program, now being implemented at help centers across the country. She and David had become advocates for what they called integrated relationship development, an approach that honored both intellectual understanding and emotional wisdom. "The tools we developed together," she wrote, "have taken on lives of their own. Each person who learns them adapts them to their own situation, adding new insights and perspectives. It's like watching ripples spread across a pond, each wave carrying the potential for transformation." She shared a story about a recent challenge in her own relationship, a potential cross-country move for David's work. Instead of triggering old anxiety patterns, the situation became an opportunity to apply and deepen their practice of integrated problem-solving. "We spent evenings mapping out possibilities, acknowledging fears, exploring opportunities, and checking in with our emotional responses. The process wasn't perfect. We still had moments of worry and uncertainty. But we could hold those moments within a larger context of trust and understanding." Their decision about the move was still pending, as she wrote, but she emphasized that the outcome felt less important than the process of navigating it together. "What I've learned," she reflected, "is that emotional intelligence through critical thinking isn't a destination. It's a practice. Each challenge, each change, each moment of uncertainty is an invitation to deepen our understanding and strengthen our connection." As I read her words, I thought about all the readers who would encounter this book, each bringing their own experiences, challenges, and hopes to these pages. Like Anne, many might be seeking ways to reconcile their analytical strengths with their emotional needs. Others might be looking for tools to build stronger, more resilient relationships. To all of you, I offer these final thoughts. Your analytical mind is not an obstacle to emotional connection. It's a powerful tool for understanding and growing through your emotional experiences. The key is learning to use it in service of emotional wisdom rather than emotional avoidance. The journey of integrating critical thinking with emotional intelligence is uniquely yours. Take what resonates from these pages and make it your own. Adapt the tools, modify the approaches, and create practices that work for your specific situation. Remember that growth isn't linear. There will be moments of clarity and confusion, progress and setback. Each experience is an opportunity for deeper understanding if we approach it with curiosity and compassion. Most importantly, you're not alone on this journey. As Anne's story demonstrates, each person who learns to bridge the gap between head and heart creates possibility for others to do the same. And concluded her email with words that seem fitting to end this book. Sometimes, late at night, I take out my old journals and read through my early entries. All the fear, confusion, and longing for connection. I feel such tenderness for that earlier version of myself, and such gratitude for the journey that brought me here. To anyone just beginning this path, trust that your desire to understand, to grow, to connect more deeply, is already the first step toward transformation. The tools and insights will come. The understanding will develop. The connection you seek is possible. Just keep walking, one step at a time, bringing both your mind and heart to the journey. May your own journey of integration bring you the understanding, connection, and growth you seek. The path continues, and each step forward creates new possibilities for yourself and others.